Hi, it's Charlie from Innovation Enterprise here. I'm here with Chris Daly, who is Head of Experience and Product Design at Sotheby's. Chris, you're speaking at the Digital Design and Web Innovation Summit in LA this September. Hi,
Yep.
Chris.
How's it going?
Not bad, thanks. So if we just dive straight into the questions, first of which is, what, in your view, are the fundamental tenets of good experience design?
You know, a lot of people, a lot of companies and UX people talk about sort of surprise and delight and sort of, on, that kind of targeted design. In my opinion, I think the real core of good user experience design comes down to two things, authenticity and accuracy. And authenticity, what I mean by that is, remaining true to the brand that the UX is really trying to bring to life. What's the underlying story of the brand, and how can you sort of effectively put that into the UX? It's often the case that bad user experience and bad UI comes from a real disconnect between where a brand is positioned or where it's trying to move to, and sort of what the UX sort of accurately reflects. A good example of that is sort of this ongoing sort of crisis that you're seeing at Yahoo, and especially around like a Tumblr style service. When Yahoo bought them, the UX for Tumblr never really sort of adapted to the pivot that Yahoo was trying to give to that service, and in so doing, sort of user numbers for Tumblr went down. The revenue numbers never went up, and Yahoo is now a shell of what it used to be. And in the absence of that, sort of a real sort of pure play brand like a Medium sort of rose up, and its UX matched where its brand wanted to be and sort of moved it forward. The other side of it is accuracy, and what I mean by that is how accurate does the UX reflect the personas and the needs and the wants of the users? The features, the functions, the flow, the ins and outs of the UI. I mean, every element needs to directly tie back to sort of these sort of core personas, who you're designing for and what it is that they're trying to do. And if you don't do that, then you're not just wasting sort of design effort and development effort, you're creating bad UX. So in my mind, accuracy and authenticity, those are the fundamental tenets of good user experience design.
And how much does advertising enter your thought process when leading a UX design team?
It can be quite a bit, and in many cases, it's the horse and the cart, not just the horse leading the cart. UX as a discipline, and we've got to remember, it's a big skill set. It's still really varied. We are 20 years into sort of the .com revolution, whatever this is, the third or fourth sort of iteration of the .com revolution. But even today, there still isn't a real sort of settled lexicon for what UX means and what UX designers are. In the same way, or as opposed to sort of traditional sort of creative designers or graphic designers, words like designer, art director, creative director, these terms have sort of specific meaning and gravitas. But in the broader UX field, things really are incredibly muddy. And that's where the idea of how does advertising and UX kind of meet. It really depends on what we're trying to achieve. There are whole areas of UX and whole skill sets around UX that are product focused. Deep thinking and research and execution around specific services, specific products or digital products. But there's just as many, if not a bigger aspect of UX that relates to content and is marketing driven and is sort of goals. Let's think about it this way. If you work for the Campbell's Soup Company, your main job is likely Campbell's.com or CampbellSoup.com and some kind of sort of soup matching app. So advertising and the role of marketing is going to play a really significant part of your job, because what's the taxonomy of the marketing that's being out there in the world? How can you create a seamless experience from ad to app or from ad to site? So in that case, they're really married up. And also what visual assets and sort of what content can be reused from the marketing side to sort of the UX side. But on the other side, if you were on the design team for like an on-demand new soup company, where the play is around giving consumers tools to craft their own soups and they get vacuum packed and sort of sent to you overnight, well, then advertising is not going to play a part in your life, but in fact, your UX design should be playing a big consideration part in the marketing and the advertising. So sort of the roles are reversed. So it's really going to come down to what's the driving aspect of the type of work that you're doing in terms of how advertising is going to enter into your UX design team.
And how much do you think it's important to have a mobile first UX strategy, and what are the different challenges that come with that?
I think mobile first it's a great term, and it's really catchy, and it can move a lot of money sort of, from a budgetary standpoint, but it isn't necessarily sort of, in my opinion, sort of the be all end all. I am a mobile simultaneous type designer, and I advocate sort of my teams to be mobile simultaneous, meaning, when we're looking at sort of a product or a service development, I want to see it and I want to think about it simultaneously across a multitude of form factors. Here at Sotheby's, for example, we're developing sort of a set of new apps and a whole bunch of new sort of features and functionality, but we're thinking about that features and functionality across 6 different viewports, 3 different responsive design sizes, mobile iOS for small form factors, mobile iOS for large form factors, and a generalized Android set. So in a lot of respects, you might want to sort of think about sort of a lot of services will go and say app first and then sort of roll it back. But if you don't have sort of a broad distribution strategy from the get-go, then you're really going to start to sort of shoot yourself in the foot. From a UX challenging on mobile devices standpoint, I think the real sort of interesting aspect is how sort of iOS's universal design sort of language kind of speaks to how sort of UX works and how design works. When you think about the idea of iOS universal design, it's that a single app can morph and change between an iPhone 5 SE portrait style all the way up to an iPad Pro gigantic sort of landscape style. And it's the same app, it's the same code base. And so very similar to the way, when we first started thinking about responsive design 4 or 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, we have to think about that, as it relates to sort of universal design. Small icons and small sort of action points on an iPad Pro within that iOS universal standpoint are going to be incredibly small when you think about sort of iPad minis and 5Ss. So you need to have that sort of flexibility in mind when you talk about sort of UX design across sort of a mobile first or a mobile simultaneous strategy.
In terms of sort of big trends, we've been talking a lot about chatbots lately. How much of an impact do you actually think they'll have on UX design?
You cannot underestimate how big chatbots and sort of conversational commerce is going to have on UX going forward. 20 years ago, we were talking about e-commerce as sort of the revolution. 10 years ago, it was m-commerce. If we're not talking about c-commerce, conversational commerce, as the primary driver for user experience and UI and product design for the next 5 years, then A, I'm going to be out of a job, but B, I think we've completely missed the boat. There's the famous William Gibson quotation: "The future is here; it's just not evenly distributed yet." Never truer than it comes to sort of chatbots. When you look at the Asian markets with WeChat in China, Line in Korea and Japan, these folks are miles and miles ahead of Western markets, especially the US, when it comes to the role of chatbots, the role of conversational commerce, the role of sort of the chat interface. And in certainly the next year, the next 2 to 3 years, I think this is going to be the primary thing that UX designers are talking about. I mean, Facebook is already sort of investing heavily, not just in their primary messaging capability, but also against sort of WhatsApp. iOS 10 is going to have a significant improvement on iMessenger capabilities from this. Google is launching chat service after video chat service after chat service. And this is all we're going to be talking about. It's going to be a big part of my presentation coming up at the summit in Los Angeles. And I think it's going to be a dominant factor for a lot of people's lives in the next 2 to 3 years.
Do you think that inevitably results in more sort of centralization, because it will be via messaging apps in future? Other apps will be trying to add themselves onto messaging apps.
Absolutely, and it comes down to form factor, and and it comes down to sort of size. It's like when you think about the development of a website and you have a nice big giant fat screen, and then you start thinking about the development of an app and you have increasingly smaller screens. Now you're talking about a slice of a chat app where you're trying to create the same brand impact, you're trying to create the same service delivery, you're trying to create the same overall sort of satisfaction and sort of user value in a very, very small form factor that you were previously doing in an app and then previously doing in a site. And so as that form factor goes down, the need to be incredibly strong from a brand and accuracy standpoint goes exponentially up, and we'll get into that more in my presentation at the summit. But it's fundamental to the work we're all going to be doing.
Yeah, I guess it just means that the sort of tone of the conversation is all important, essentially. And finally, how far do you think UX should be data driven?
It's as much as it can be. That really gets also to a point of what is data in that sense. There's another great LinkedIn meme from the famous managing consultant and engineer named Edward Demings. He said, without data, you're just another guy with an opinion. And that's not to say that opinions are bad. You know, gut instinct is often just as effective, if not more effective, in creating truly disruptive and innovations and truly interesting sort of new products and services. But to be honest, the bulk of really good UX design isn't just in the initial disruption of a market or a service. It's in the ongoing optimization and enhancement and improvement and sort of and how you pick something up that's been disruptive and carry it forward for 3 or 4 years or for 10 years. Facebook's a great example of that. Incredibly disruptive when it first launched 10 years ago, but its real power is in the ability to evolve and its ability to expand, and that's entirely sort of data driven. You know, if we want to be all sort of opinion driven and sort of gut instinct folks, that's great. We're all going to have, you know, wonderful experiences in short bursts of sort of interesting sort of disruptive design. But if you want to build sustainable business, if you want to build a sustainable practice as a UX designer, then your game needs to be in optimization, and that's where data comes in, where you're looking at e-commerce flows, you're looking at sort of how different components of your site sort of track back to personas, and you're looking to tweak. You're just looking to sort of move the needle 1 or 2%, where as you scale a business up, you know, 1% goes from a $10,000 decision to $1 million decision really, really quickly. And, you know, and that's, you know, and that's been my bread and butter as a sort of a UX designer and as a product designer for the bulk of my career. And I think it will continue to be, you know, down the road.
And that's all the questions, Chris. So thanks for your time.
All right.
And we'll see.
Happy to do it. Looking forward to seeing you
in LA.
All right, guys. Have a great day, everybody.
You too.
Cheers.